On August 17th, 1996, at around 6 p.m., 65-year-old Jack L. Robinson, a retired veteran of the Air Force who had served 25 years, drove from his apartment to the Rosewood Boat Landing in Columbia, South Carolina. The boat ramp was in a quiet, isolated area surrounded by trees along the Congaree River, used by the few who knew of it to relax and have picnics. But what would happen that day would change what the area was known for forever. Three witnesses saw Jack talking to a man who they described as seeming like either an acquaintance or possibly even a friend. Jack and the man walked out of the parking lot and into a clearing in the trees. Shortly after, Jack was heard yelling, "What is it that you want?" and making offers of money, followed by a loud scream. His assailant would flee on foot, and Jack would stumble out of the woods, clutching stab wounds on his stomach. Witnesses called 911, and Jack was rushed to the hospital. Within 3 hours, he would be dead. But over 25 years later, the man who took his life still hasn't been identified. This is the story of Jack L. Robinson. Quick word before we begin. For those of you not familiar with my channel, what I do is interview the loved ones of missing persons and unsolved homicides in an effort to help spread awareness and bring closure to the families. This video marks a new format for the channel, where I will first dig into the cases a few days before the interview. I hope this helps inform the audience of the case better so that you can be better prepared for the interview. As I'm new to this, I welcome any comments, questions, suggestions, or critiques below. In fact, I'm requesting them. And as always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment so that the YouTube algorithm knows you enjoyed this video and it knows to recommend it to more people so we can help get these families the closure they so desperately deserve. If you enjoyed this video and would like to be a part of my interview with Jack's daughter Tammy live, please join us this Friday, September 9th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you. We're going to begin this video by first reading an NBC News report on the case, so all credit goes to them for the article. I will then show pictures of Jack and his family while I relay information about the case's only known suspect, and we'll finish with an email from Jack's daughter Tammy herself. So what we have here is NBCnews.com Dateline's article in the case. Daughter of 1996 South Carolina murder victim Jack Robinson continues search for answers 25 years after his fatal stabbing. Authorities have released a new composite sketch and an age progression of what the suspect could look like today. As you see here, this was the sketch. This obviously is, a computer model version of it. And on the left, and here on the right is what they believe he might look like today. Of course, he may or may not have the mustache or any additional facial hair. Jack Robinson served in the United States Air Force for 25 years. A proud airman, he had enlisted right out of high school, quickly rose to the rank of technical sergeant, and served a tour in Vietnam. But Jack's other passion was trains. He loved trains, his daughter Tammy told Dateline. Growing up in Columbia, South Carolina, part of a family with a lot of siblings, but not a lot of money, Christmases for Jack were limited, and the children typically only received one gift each. Jack always asked for some sort of toy train, but he longed to one day ride one. It would be years before he got that chance. After his marriage with Tammy's mother ended, Jack opted to stay in Columbia while his ex-wife and their daughter moved their lives to Florida. Jack retired from the U.S. Air Force after 25 years and then spent an additional 20 years as a civil servant working at the Moncrief Army Health Clinic. But he always made time to visit his daughter and two grandsons in Florida. Tammy told Dateline that when her boys were little, just 2 and 4, her father decided to take them on his and their first train ride, something he of course had been looking forward to all his life. He wanted the boys to experience the train, Tammy said, because he never got that opportunity. He was excited to see their reactions. The train rides between South Carolina and Florida continued for years, until the summer of 1996. Jack's grandsons were 10 and 12 that summer. Tammy told Dateline they still loved hanging out with their grandfather, going to the beach and getting ice cream. But a phone call Tammy received on August 17, 1996 would shatter their lives forever. I was told my father was dead, she said. But not just that, he had been murdered, stabbed to death. I didn't know what to think. We were in shock for the longest time. According to Deputy Chief Stan Smith with the Richland County Sheriff's Department, deputies responded to the Rosewood Boat Landing at the end of Rosewood Drive, just down the road from the South Carolina State Fairgrounds in Columbia, for a report of a man who had been stabbed. Quick interjection here, the boat landing has been changed. I'll pull up the name or we'll go over it in the interview, but that was the old name for it. I know it has been changed. That's where they discovered the injured 65-year-old Jack Robinson. Witnesses told deputies that Jack, who had driven down to the boat landing in his white four-door 1991 Dodge Dynasty, met with a man and walked with him into a wooded area. Short time later, witnesses heard the two men start to argue and said they heard Jack tell the man he could get him money and then loudly exclaimed, "What is it that you want?" before the argument seemed to turn physical. Jack's daughter told Dateline that she doesn't believe the murder was over money because she knows her father would have given the person cash if he had it, although she said he rarely carried much cash. The argument between the two men that day was followed by a scream, witnesses say, and then they said they saw Jack stumble out of the woods, clutching his stomach and chest. He had been stabbed and was pleading for help. The witnesses called 911, and Jack was rushed to Palmetto Health Richland Hospital, where he died from his injuries within just a few hours. Chief Smith told Dateline that 3 witnesses gave their statements to the deputies in duty at that time, and they all had the same story. They also gave a solid description of the suspect to police. He was described as a Latino male, about 5'10", 160 pounds or so, with a mustache, and he was wearing dark Ray-Ban or aviator-style sunglasses. He was believed to be around 25 to 35 years old. An investigation revealed that Jack most likely knew the suspect, and there were theories that they may have had a physical relationship. I want to stop here. I can't speak for her, but via her email, I know for a fact that if this were to be true, it was completely shocking to the family. They did not know the dad to be gay. I believe they don't think it's true, but I know and we'll go over that in the interview, of course. We're going to save some things for the interview. I know for a fact that if he was, they knew nothing about it, but I believe that they don't believe that to be true. And again, this is not something the police know for sure. This is a theory. Tammy told Dateline that shortly before her father was killed, he frequented a gay bar in the area. She added that the boat landing was a hangout spot for some locals, but she does not know what he would be doing there that day. And they did look at his phone calls. I'm interjecting here again. And they couldn't find anything that would seem to point to a reason as to why Jack would have been there that day. Tammy said her father had a number of friends, but that he was quiet, mostly kept to himself unless he was helping others. He would never hesitate to help someone in need, she said. He would never hurt someone, and it makes no sense why someone would want to hurt him. When Jack wasn't working or spending time with his grandsons, he was volunteering at homeless shelters and working on campaigns for the local Democratic Party. You know, it's a shame. When people pass, it's very common for people to say, you know, he's a great person, they would never hurt anybody, things like that. But Jack seemed to really have that background to where this wasn't just something people said, this was proven. He was 45 years a civil servant, 25 years in the Air Force, 20 additional years at the hospital. He worked at homeless shelters, volunteering, worked on a political campaign. I mean, he did a lot for his community and the people within it. So this truly was a guy that deserves those sentiments. About a year following the murder, Tammy said she got word that a man charged in another death in the county, which we will go over shortly, was also a person of interest in her father's murder. At that point, I thought it was over, she told Dateline, but it wasn't even close. I was in for another shock. It turned out that the man was never charged in her father's murder. About 14 years after her father was killed, Tammy was online, browsing the internet for her family history. She stumbled upon her father's name. It was included in a sheriff's office press release asking the public to come forward with information. I called and was connected with Chief Smith of the cold case unit, she said, and I've been working his case ever since. I work his case every day. Again, we will go over that in depth shortly. August marked 25 years since her father's murder, and Tammy hasn't given up her search for answers. On August 17th, 2021, Tammy, along with the Richland County Sheriff's Department, held a news conference in Columbia, South Carolina. A composite sketch and an age progression composite, which we just saw, of what the suspect could look like today was released by deputies in the hope that someone will recognize him and come forward. This particular situation is the first time we've used this new computer technology to enhance a composite sketch and also an age progression of that. So we're excited about the possibility it may lead us to identify him or give us a new lead. Just hearing the story once again. Lieutenant Kevin Eisenhower of the Richland County Sheriff's Department said at the press conference in August. And of course, this is them there at the press conference. New posters and a billboard have gone up in the area where Jack was killed. Tammy regularly posts to Justice for Jack Robinson Facebook page, hoping one day someone comes forward and helps solve the case. One more quick interjection. There will be all the necessary links posted in the description below the video. Just expand the description. I believe it will say see more, and you'll see everything that we have there. Tammy told Dateline she will not stop telling her father's story until she knows the name of the person who took him away and caused their family 25 years of pain. It's been a 25-year nightmare, she said. When someone is murdered, someone you love tears you apart and never leaves you. Tammy will be 63 this year, close to the age her father was when he was killed, and said she feels most of her life has been consumed with the case. Her hope is that it will be solved before she's gone. My sons have promised to take over the fight if anything happens to me, Tammy said, so that gives me some peace. For now, she continues to give her father a voice by telling his story. It's hard to talk about my father, hard to tell his story, Tammy said, but I have to tell his story, so he's never forgotten. Anyone with information about Jack's case is asked to contact the Richland County Sheriff's Department at 803-576-3073 or Crime Stoppers at 1-888-CRIME-SC. SC like South Carolina. Okay, now we are going to get into some other information that's not included in this article in regards to one of the suspects on the case. As far as I'm aware, the only suspect there's ever been, and what happened there. And then we will finish with Tammy's email. As mentioned in the NBC article, 20 of Jack's 45 years of civil servitude had been spent working at the military hospital Moncrief Army Health Clinic, where he worked for 5 years along a 30-year-old blood technician named Kimberly Brown. While Kimberly didn't have any children herself, she was the guardian for her 3-year-old niece, Leah Brazil. Kimberly was known as a dependable employee who never failed to show up for a shift, so when she didn't come in for work on Tuesday, November 18th, 1997, a little over a year after Jack's murder, her co-workers became worried for her safety. At the same time, Cora, Kimberly's mother, was increasingly concerned when Kimberly wasn't answering her phone calls, so she took it upon herself to go to Kimberly's apartment. There, she found the front door unlocked, both Kimberly and Leah missing, and blood on the carpet. After calling Moncrief and learning her daughter didn't show up for work, Cora immediately contacted the Richland County Sheriff's Department. After searching her apartment, Kimberly's apartment, police found an address book and began contacting the names within it, and one stood out. 20-year-old Max Naughton. Max was best friends with Kimberly's younger brother, and their fathers had joined the Army together. Families knew each other well. When Max admitted to seeing Kimberly the night before on Monday between 9 to 10 p.m., he quickly became a person of interest. At first, things seemed to look okay for Max, though. He claimed to have left at 10 p.m. and spent the night at a co-worker's house. And the co-worker confirmed his alibi to police. But it would all fall apart when the co-worker would later come forward and admit he had lied to police at the request of Max. When police confronted Max on this, his story changed. He now said that after leaving Kimberly's apartment, he had blacked out for hours. And guess where he claimed to have come to and woken up after blacking out? The Rosewood Boat Landing. The same Rosewood Boat Landing Jack Robinson had been murdered the previous year. As Max's statements and confessions changed, they became worse and worse and fell apart more and more. Eventually, he admitted to having sex with Kimberly, claiming it was consensual, And just as police began to feel sure something awful had happened to the poor young woman, Kimberly Brown's body was found by fishermen in the Congaree River, the river that borders the Rosewood Boat Landing. By the time the body was confirmed to be Kim's, Max had already given a full confession, admitting he had attacked Kimberly in her apartment that night, raped her, hit her over the head with a sharp object, and then wrapped her in a blanket and took her out in his trunk around dawn. Horrifically, he took 3-year-old Leah out with him, still in her pajamas, and told her that they were going to find her aunt together. Young Leah's body would be found on Thursday, one day after Kimberly's, and authorities identified her cause of death as drowning. He drowned her. 3 years old. Max Naughton was convicted on 2 counts of murder and kidnapping and an additional sexual assault charge, and he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, as well as an additional 30-year term for the sexual assault. Rest in peace to Kimberly and Leah, and may Max rot for eternity. And this brings us back to Jack Robinson. Because of many similarities in the cases, police were pretty certain Max was also responsible for the murder of Jack Robinson. Not only had both been linked to the Rosewood Boat Landing, but Jack and Kimberly had known each other through work, and bloodhounds had actually traced the scent from where Jack was murdered right to a local business. Max Naughton worked at that business. Throughout Max's trial for Kim and Leah's double homicide, Tammy was told more info would come out about her father's case. She was told that though there wasn't enough evidence on Max in her father's case, he was the one and only suspect, and they believed he had committed the crime. So Tammy was shocked when years later, in the mid-2000s, on the Richland County Cold Case website, her father's case was still listed as an unsolved cold case. She immediately contacted investigators to learn that not only did they change their minds and not believe Max to be her father's killer, but incredibly, they had never bothered to contact her to tell her. Because of that, she had lost years and years of advocating for her father and attempting to bring him justice, all because of that frankly terrible decision not to inform her. She has spent the decades since trying to make up for lost time and getting the word out about her father's case. While there's much more to her case, Max Naughton, and everything else revolving this unsolved mystery, I'm going to save some of the details for my interview with Tammy this Friday, as I feel it's important that a lot of it comes from her, not from me, of course. If you would like to watch mine and Tammy's interview live, I remind you, you can also join in on the chat and ask her and I questions live. Please join us Friday, September 9th, 2022, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We'll now end this video with an email in Tammy's own words, and I'll see you Friday. Tammy begins her email putting RCSD case number 081-796-3023. Lieutenant Kevin Eisenhoward, Chief Smith, Detective Dottie, are the detectives and lieutenants in chief currently on the case. Crime Stoppers 1-803-576-3073 or Crime Stoppers 803 Crime SC. So it looks like those are different numbers than the ones listed below or earlier. She says, my father, Jack L. Robinson, was retired Air Force, and after retirement, he went to work for Moncrief Hospital out at Fort Jackson Army Base. My father married my mom in June 1957. A year later, I came along. After 35 years, my parents got a divorce. Then my dad met a lady that he married, and they were together about 15 years, and he did not remarry after his second wife. My father was taught well in the United States Air Force to be very secretive. He was a good man, and he was very strict on me. My dad loved telling jokes with a straight face, and everyone else would be doubled over from laughter. Dad would come to Florida and visit us all the time for the holidays. He loved the train ride because he had so many sisters and brothers that they would get him one gift, as it said in the article, and all my dad wanted was to ride a train. He was in his late 40s to middle 50 when he did ride the train, I believe is what she's saying. And he got a train set for his grandsons. I had two boys, she said, as we know from the article. My dad bought tickets for the boys and I to come visit him, and we rode the train. He wanted my sons to ride the train at least one time. That was a passion of his. We would have great family reunions and would have so much fun. My dad loved his family, and he'd give you the shirt off his back if he had to. He was very giving to people. When he came, we would always end up at the beach in St. Augustine and at Dairy Cream for a banana split. He loved them. The boys were in Little League baseball, so he enjoyed their games. My youngest even played football, so Dad got to watch my youngest play. Though my parents were divorced, they got along good. My dad also had to go visit my mom and her husband, and Mom would bake all his desserts that he loved. Sounds like they had a good relationship even afterwards for the kids. No, I'm sure. It's my assumption. My dad was very special to me. He also was with two of his sisters. He also with two of his sisters would feed the homeless at the shelters. Plus, he did a lot at our church in Olympia. Dad was outgoing, smart, strict, but most of all, he loved me and his grandsons, and he did not get to meet his great-grandson. They were his life. Dad could be very funny when he wanted to be, even with a straight face. He loved riding around on Christmas and seeing all the houses decorated, and he would tell me he'd never seen anything so beautiful at Christmas time and as the homes that were lit up and decorated. My dad loved to play with his organ. We would sit around and he played and we would sing. We'd have a great time with all the family. My dad went to Southside Baptist Church from the time he was born, and his whole family went to Southside till they were married, and then they went somewhere different, a different church. Sorry, sometimes people, it's kind of hard to read. This is the first time, I apologize. Dad would help at the church whenever he was needed. We love you, Dad, and we miss you very much. When my father got murdered, I regret that I allowed a year to go by without really speaking with him. I would write him letters, and he would not answer. One of his sisters lived with him, and he found her daughter Gracie to come get her, and she went and lived with her daughter. Dad had changed. My husband and I were getting a divorce, and my dad was so upset at me because I went through with it. He told me I had to fight no matter what to work it out with Doug, and that I had to fight to keep us together, and that we had to love and laugh and enjoy our children. So Jack, of course, very big on family. My dad loved Doug so much, and it devastated my dad. So that's the reason that her and her dad weren't speaking for a period of time. Then I got the bad news. Horrible, heartbreaking, drop to your knees news that my father had been stabbed to death and murdered, and he had died on the operating table. We packed up, and me and my mom and my two sons went to see him. It was the most heartbreaking experience that I've ever had. When he died, my heart broke in a million pieces. When we got to Columbia, the first thing I had to do was go to the coroner's office to ID my father's body. I had never done that before. It was a feeling that's hard to explain. He had defensive marks on his thumbs and behind his ears. There were 3 witnesses, 1 lady and 2 men. They stayed with my dad till the ambulance got there, and he would not give a name and claimed he did not know the man. The witness heard my dad say, "I do not have anything. I can give you money, and what do you want with me?" Then my dad came down the hill from the trees at the Rosewood Boat Landing in Olympia/Columbia, South Carolina, by the fairgrounds. I want to point out, too, this was a spot you really had to know the area. That's something that's mentioned a lot throughout the articles. This wasn't like somewhere a lot of people knew to go. The people who went there really knew. It was behind like a rock quarry, from what I understand. My dad was holding his shirt to his abdomen, bleeding badly. He fell to the ground, and the lady who was one of the witnesses put his head in her lap. The thing was, my dad didn't do drugs, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke cigarettes. He was a very clean-cut man that did not get into trouble. And he did what he was supposed to do. He went to church every Sunday where we lived. He would go morning, noon, and night if the doors were open. My dad was clean. No cops, no arrests, nothing. Sort of a dry type of man. After they got him to the coroner's office, I had to go to the Richland County Sheriff's Office to meet with the detective in 1996. The detectives now are different than they were then. We went into a big conference room, and that is where his 1 brother and 3 sisters and myself and my mom sat while the detective informed us that my dad was stabbed to death and that they believed my father was gay and he had met his gay lover. Then they said that they could not prove it for sure. They also said they have no idea if they even knew each other and could not understand why my dad would be at the boat landing since he did not fish or own a boat. So they could not figure out why my dad would be there. I also have no clue why my dad would be at this place. Over the fence was a rock quarry. I just don't understand why he was there. My family and I could drop our teeth at these allegations. They felt that it was out of line, that they never saw any evidence of that with their father, and they're not really sure why the police are thinking that. I felt like I was in a fog. Nothing seemed real. It was all just a blank, like a tiny time tunnel I could not get out of. I now walk around in such a fog that this could happen to my dad, and I wonder, why did this happen? It's a horrible feeling that's so hard to explain. I had to go to my dad's condo to see what was happening. We got there and the cops were there. And sorry, 1 second. There was black dust all over the place. Oh, I guess dusting for fingerprints. I had to dress up in a suit from head to toe to go in and look what I came for. I got inside and went to his bedroom. His clothes were gone, his shoes were gone, except for a pair of tennis shoes and a pair of dress shoes. That was it. What I had went for was gone. So I guess they'd taken everything. When I'd go visit him, he'd show me the box and that this is where it would be. I apologize. Some of this we're going to have to clarify with Tammy. Second. So she's saying that there's a box. She's wondering, where in the world would my dad take this box? So she's wondering what he has the box there for. The detective gave me a letter stating I was not involved in my dad's murder and that he was my father, and the case number and phone number to the sheriff's office, so I had some form of ID from them. The only place I could think of was his bank, and sure enough, that's where it was. After we got done with the detectives, they totally blew our mind about my dad. His sisters and brothers were just not understanding of what was going on and why the police believed what they did. They did not know their brother to be that way. My dad had a girlfriend, and we went to see her, and she was even shocked over that he was accused of being gay and that he was with his gay lover that day. The allegations. I feel that they have a lot to prove if they were claiming that my dad was gay, because he had a girlfriend. And of course, anyone in a relationship, you're going to find out something like that. It's a shock, even more of a shock when there's more information like that on top of it. Since my dad was in the Air Force, I decided to go with them to do his funeral. He had served 25 years of his life in Vietnam, Bermuda, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Rapid City, South Dakota, Charlotte, North Carolina, Alaska. He had went all over the place. When he came home from Alaska to see his mother, that's when he met my mom. Years later, they got married in 1957, and then a year later, I came along in 1958. That's when my dad started in the Air Force, and we went to all his deployments. The Air Force came to speak with me about my dad at his funeral and what I want to have done. And she kind of goes over here the gun salute and kind of what the service members do when it's a service funeral. They're expected to salute during the following instances: when the hearse passes them, the flag-draped casket moves, or the folded flag and urn pass by, the gun salute during taps, and when they're lowering the casket. Standard honors include the firing party, a bugler, and pallbearers. Any service member that left the Air Force in good standing and obtained rank E1 through E8 qualifies for a standard honors funeral. Later that day, when I got home to his condo, the detective had something for me. I had sent my dad a card and a letter that they had read every bit of, and my dad had wrote me a letter that had not been put in the mail yet, so they gave me that. I was so happy to see a letter from my dad. That made everything at that moment feel better, because he told me how much he loved me and that he was proud of me, and that he was so sorry for not returning my letters and phone calls. So thank God they got to make up over the disagreement that they had about the divorce. You know, all was well in the end in regards to the relationship. He knew this was going to be devastating news to me, my mom, brothers, and sisters. Okay, so that's the majority of Timmy's letter. We'll finish up here talking a little bit about Max. She said that she's shocked when they dropped the charges of Max Naughton, and she feels that they should have done a lot more work. They should have went back to the table, the drawing board, and they should have told her so that she could do the same. She feels a lot of time was lost and it just wasn't right how they handled it. And I have to say, I agree. And I want to just say anything anyone talked about in this video, everything's alleged. We're not accusing anyone of any crimes or wrongdoings. This is simply a family trying to get answers and figure things out. Tammy has groups on Facebook for missing children and adults, unsolved cold case groups, unidentified groups. We'll put all the links below that she would like us to. And she has her dad's community page, which is Justice for Jack L. Robinson. Here, I dedicate to my father all his interviews, all the podcasts I've done, anything that deals with my dad, and what I want from my dad, and to share his story. People that see it and read it and pass it on, I am his voice, and I have to make sure that it gets out to both, the people who read the page as well as the detectives. I keep up with this case, but it's a cold case that's getting colder because they do not inform anybody. And again, I agree. She believes that the man who did this is still alive in Colombia, and he lives close by the area. She says you can call Chief Smith or Lieutenant Eisenhower. Contact Richland County Sheriff's Department Cold Case Squad at 803-576-3073, or contact Detective Dottie Cronise, Cronise, or call Crime Stoppers Tip Line at 1-888-CRIME-SC, or Midlands Crime Stoppers Tip Line at 2-888-CRIME-SC. It's got to be 1. I'm guessing that's a typo. Yeah, but either way, Midlands Crime Stoppers. Okay, guys, we're going to stop it there. Again, if you are interested in this case and you have additional questions to ask Tammy, please join us for the interview. It will be this Friday, 9/9/22 at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Please adjust your time, whatever your time zone is. Thank you so much. My name's Jason Hebert. I've been your host for tonight, and I will see you guys on Friday. I love you all. Take care.